So I just want to say welcome to everybody, and thank you all very much for joining us in this first community conversation, where we will be discussing mission, vision, and values. I'm Mark Olthoff. I'm the board president at Artist Trust, as Christina said. As I think we are all aware, earlier this year, a group of community organizers published an open letter calling Artist Trust leadership into action. And we were asked to evaluate a few things. One of them was internal and external policies surrounding 2 of the grant cycles that we were in. One was decision-making processes within our organization, as well as staff issues. And we were asked to be more accountable to our community. This letter acted as a catalyst for systemic change that's taking place at Artist Trust. And this community conversation, this first community conversation is part of that work, and we'll be having more. And we're really happy about that and really grateful to everybody who's here with us today. And especially to those of you who pushed Artist Trust in this direction of transparency and accountability. At the end of the conversation, we'll have room for a Q&A. And to expedite this, we would like to ask a favor. If anybody has a question during the process, please drop it in the chat throughout the conversation. A staff member will be keeping track of them and compiling them for the end of this session. If all questions in the chat, we won't have time to answer them all, but we'll try our very best. Please put an asterisk at the beginning of your conversation if you're a person of color, and we'll prioritize those. After this conversation, all registrants will be emailed a form where they can anonymously share thoughts and feedback. Look for that tomorrow. A recording of this conversation and that form will also be available on our website tomorrow. I'd like to acknowledge that we don't have captions available today, and we apologize for that too. As I said, I just want to thank all who are in this conversation, as well as many community members, many board members, and staff who are in the audience today. So thanks, everybody. At this time, I'd like to turn the meeting over to Paul Rucker. Paul Rucker is a visual artist, a composer, and a musician whose work investigates community impacts, human rights issues, historical research, and basic human emotions. Paul has received innumerable accolades through his career, including awards from Artist Trust, and is currently an iCubed Arts Research Fellow at Virginia Commonwealth University in Richmond, Virginia, and the Curator for Creative Collaboration for VCU Arts. Paul, just wanted to say thank you so much for taking the time and for being our moderator tonight.
Thank you for the introduction. I want to thank all of you for showing up for this, panelists, staff, and board. Again, full disclosure, Mark mentioned I've received a great deal of support from Artist Trust, our Fellowship, Arts Innovator Award, Conductor Garboil and Gap, and there's something else. But I've also been very critical of Artist Trust over 20 years because of many of the reasons that we're here today. So I'm really excited and glad to see this gathering happening, and I'm hoping that it's the first of many, as we've talked about. And I want to just dive right in. I'd love for each of the artists to just say a short sentence or two about themselves and introduce themselves. And we can just go Natasha, Remelisa, Chris, and Matt. Can we do that order? Thank you.
Sounds good. My name is Natasha Marin. Thanks for including my voice in this conversation. Like Paul, I have received a lot of support from Artist Trust, and I've also provided a little bit of support in my role as an anti-racism consultant. And I think it's a difficult thing to navigate, feeling supported by an organization, but also criticizing an organization. And I just want to make space for that vulnerability in this conversation.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Remelisa Cullitan. I live in Spokane, Washington. I am a visual artist and I have also been supported by Artist Trust. I was a 2018 GAP recipient. Um, yeah, born and raised in Spokane. I'm just here to represent the eastern side of Washington.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Christopher Icasiano. I am a percussionist and composer here in Seattle. Also have received quite a bit of support from Artist Trust over the last few years, which I'm very grateful for. And I'm really happy and excited to be part of this conversation.
Thank you. Matt?
Hi, everyone. My name is Matt Offenbacher, and I'm a visual artist and publisher. I live and work in Seattle. And I've gotten a GAP grant. It was a lot of years ago, but I have gotten money from Artist Trust, which was appreciated. And I am excited. I feel like this is such an opportunity for us collectively to try to help Artist Trust reimagine how they are doing things. So I'm really glad to be here.
Super. I'm going to do some introduction of staff and board members who are present with us. I would like to do this. Christina?
Sure. I'm Christina Getz, and I'm the acting executive director of Artist Trust. I use she, her pronouns. And I've been with the organization for about 5 years. Previously, my role was director of development. So great to see you all.
And Cezanne and Lydia?
Good evening. My name is Cezanne Garcia. I'm a 6th-year board member with Artist Trust, and I'm currently serving as vice president, and want to extend gratitude not only to those who are here on our panelists on the webinar, but also to our participants, and looking forward to learning and listening this evening. Thank you. And I'll pass it on to Lydia.
Hi, my name is Lydia Boss, and I'm a program manager at Artist Trust. My pronouns are she, her. I'm also a visual artist and very happy to be here with you all tonight. Thank you.
I'll round up back with Mark. Did you introduce yourself?
Hi, no, my name's kinda. I'm Mark Oltoff. I'm also, this is my 6th year on the board as well. I'm the president this year. And I am also an architect here in town and have been aware of Artist Trust for as long as I've been here, for 20 some years, and have supported it. I am really, I'm excited for this opportunity a lot. I'm really excited for us to be able to talk and here to listen. So thanks for everybody again.
Great. Let's jump right in. And basically the format today will be, or this evening, depending where you are, we have 3 questions, 3 starting places, and they can go anywhere. I think Matt mentioned imagination, and right now it's important to not limit ourselves with addressing just what's happened recently, but what can happen in the future with the organization, and all possibilities. After the 3 questions get addressed, we're going to go into a Q&A section, and each question will have around 10 minutes. So hopefully we'll stick to that time period. And let's just dive right in. And I guess the first question is, what does an inclusive and successful Artist Trust look like? And I'm just gonna open it up to anyone who wants to take that on first. Yeah,
It'd be super.
Oh, Natasha.
Sorry. I was just going to say it'd be super nifty to have, more non-white folks in leadership positions and on the board.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Remelisa.
One thing I would like to touch on is obviously transparency. I think a lot of people are always so curious how do things work on the back end, and it's important to be able to provide those answers in a way that they can understand and appreciate.
Super. Chris, Matt?
Yeah, I'll hop in there. Well, I think it's really important. I mean, when we're talking about inclusivity, you know, it's asking the question, who are we excluding? And I think the situation with Artist Trust as a nonprofit organization, as an arts institution, we're dealing with a lot of layers of systemic oppression. All of those different institutions, were founded on in white supremacy and to promote white advantage. And yeah, so to think about how what does it look like? I'm thinking about how does Artist Trust? Asking the question, how does Artist Trust commit to anti-racism work, or more intersectional anti-oppression work, not just in programs and granting programs, but I'm thinking about how does it do it in like Natasha said, in terms of like staff and board. How do we address those things in the way the organization fundraises? How we find diversity and equity in cultivating donors, administration, budgeting and finance. Like all of the different aspects of the organization need to have a focus to be doing specific anti-racism work. Because if we're just doing it, in the programming level and on the granting level, there's still many other layers where it's not being addressed. So, I think, and obviously that's a huge overhaul of an organization. But I think that's kind of the start of the work, is to think about how, how oppression exists in all of the levels of the organization.
Yeah, thank you. Matt, please.
Yeah, that's I'm totally thinking along those lines too, Chris. Today I was thinking about the name of the organization, Artist Trust, which I've always thought was kind of a clever name. And I realized today, I think it's because it has like sort of two-faced, or has two interpretations to it. One of them is sort of this idea of a trust, which I Googled it. And it's a fiduciary relationship where an intermediary holds and directs assets given by trustors on behalf of a beneficiary. So it's basically like the middle person between people who have money that they want to direct somewhere and people who are beneficiaries of those money. So obviously that is, in that sense, Artist Trust really is a trust. The other meaning I think that's always been there is that sort of more the meaning of, I guess, in artists we trust, an expression of commitment to trusting artists and believing in the work that we do in our communities. And for me, part of this transformation that I'd like to see Artist Trust take on is, I feel like that the first meaning of trust has been more dominant in the years that I've been in Seattle for Artist Trust, that it takes its responsibility as the holder of these funds from donors very seriously, and responsibility, like sort of making sure that those funds are used responsibly in an accountable way is the highest priority. And I'd really like to see Artist Trust pivot and really like emphasize that second meaning of Artist Trust, where it's really placing radical trust invested in artist communities and not worrying so much about donors. And for me, that really means prioritizing people over worrying about the control of money. And well, I have more to say, but I think we'll wait for another question. That's sort of my opening thought.
Actually, I want to stay on this question, but I would love for you to elaborate more about the successful Artist Trust look like under the current model. I know this kind of alludes to the third question later, but in order to be inclusive, in order to be successful, is the current method of funding or resources that are provided as far as websites and workshops, how can those things be more inclusive and build a successful artist trust? Do they need to be radically changed in a certain way? I mean, if you could elaborate a little bit on that from your experience.
Were you asking me particularly, Paul, or the
Oh,
group?
anyone. If you've taken any of the workshops, legal workshops, have you benefited from anything other than the funding aspect? And again, this is about reimagining what, and nothing's too ridiculous right now. If we want to throw the baby out with the bathwater and change everything radically, what would a successful organization? Someone says, hey, you're the director now, you can take this in any direction you want. What would you do differently to make it successful and more inclusive?
I think it would be interesting to imagine Artist Trust as more than just sort of a spot where you get the money, and maybe more of a community and a network. And I think you would have to promote that through generosity, really fostering a sense of generosity. Paul, I don't think you know this, but you were very generous to me once upon a time and you didn't even know it. This isn't about Artist Trust, I'm sorry, but I went to For Culture and I looked through their binder of grants and I kind of fell in love with your grant applications, and I like transcribed by hand like several passages so that I could like embody the way you approach grant writing, and it really helped me grow as an artist. And I think that Artist Trust could stand to sort of foster more of those connections in community, because Seattle is excruciatingly small in how the arts works here. And I think it would be helpful if we knew sort of like who we were in community and who we could count on, who is willing to help, who is willing to be generous, who's willing to, you know, if you need help with a website or connecting with legal information, if generosity were fostered as well as sort of information, I think that that would make the organization more sustainable overall, and certainly more, it would feel more inclusive, because Seattle doesn't always feel like an inclusive place.
No, thank you for your words. And you just made me think about some kind of mentorship, peer support type system that could be fostered through the organization. Just dropping that out there. I see some more heads going there. Please. Chris, I see you leaning forward.
Yeah, the Zoom lean forward.
Yeah.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with Natasha on that. Like I'm interested in Artist Trust being, you know, a hub for artists to go to, yeah, not just for opportunities to, you know, to get funding for their own projects and their own ideas, but a place that is, you know, a hub that fosters like creative relationships, a place that you know, that allows artists to have stake in the organization, have stake in other people's work that they do. You know, I wanna feel like I can invest in this organization, and that my investing in the organization is helping other artists as well, and I can see those being transformed into you know, output. And I think that that's tricky, because we're dealing with moving money, you know, and that there's a lot of issues in that exclude a lot of folks. You know, I'm not entirely sure what the money looks like at Artist Trust, you know, operating dollars. You know, I'm not entirely sure where the money comes from, whether it's donors or other grants. But, you know, I would like to think that not just wealthy, you know, arts philanthropists and foundations, you know, are the I would like to think that those are not the only things that fund Artist Trust. You know, I want to think that anyone can feel empowered to contribute to Artist Trust in whatever way is meaningful. You know, I think about, I mean, an organization I love in Seattle is Social Justice Fund, and I love their model of fundraising because they really they empower anyone in a community to be doing fundraising for, you know, for the grants that they give out through a course of, you know, political education, which I think is really important because you know, there's a certain amount that people need to understand about systemic racism and how that contributes to fundraising and nonprofit, so that it can empower everyone to be doing that kind of work. And yeah, I guess that's what I have to say about that. I you know, I want to see it all encompassing, like money, you know, resources being moved from all you know, different demographics of people, and you know, people who have different access to things. Yeah, and I think that could serve to really diversify how Artist Trust connects with artists and how it connects with like cultivating, you know, community.
Oh, thanks, Chris. I know a lot of people don't even look at Artist Trust until deadlines come up for like the fellowship or the gap, and that is an issue. And Matt, how many times did you apply for the gap, if you don't mind me asking? And
I don't know. I'm sorry, I don't
okay.
remember. I'm sure I've applied for many things.
Yeah,
yeah. Undoubtedly,
well,
as we all have.
yeah. I mean, I think I applied 12 or 13 times. I don't quite remember, but that's just being stubborn. But it wears on your soul a little bit, and I think your relationship with an organization can definitely shift if the thing that you're hoping to get most from the organization, which is funding and also validation, it doesn't happen, and it really wears you down. So, and no one is in.
Yeah, that makes me think, Paul, that there was something else I was thinking today. Like, it would be interesting if Artist Trust could separate out the part of what their awards are doing that are honoring people, and the part of it that's actually providing material support for artists, because I think they get confused, and they don't necessarily have to be one and the same thing. Sometimes when they are aligned really well, you end up giving money to people who don't really need it because they're already really successful and well established in their field. The other thought I had, Chris, when you were talking, is that I think part of the puzzle, at least from my perspective, is that the way that Artist Trust and, you know, a lot of arts granting organizations are set up is they're very oriented towards an idea of artists as sort of the consummate individual, you know, the genius, the I don't know, the innovator, you could say, or like brand, you know, self-brander or whatever it is, entrepreneur. It's a model of thinking about artists where like the artist is like the sort of singular, exceptional person who is continually trying to advance their own interests and career. And I think that doesn't actually really align very well with how a lot of artists really operate in the world. But what happens is putting that out there in the form of the programming and the grants is that you end up creating competition in communities for these limited resources, which just perpetuates, like Chris was saying, like really, or I think Paul, you were saying, like bad feelings, you know, distrust really directed towards the organization. And so I think like actually trying to shift like internally, like Artist Trust, like how you actually think about who artists are and what we do in the world, how we interface with not just artist community, but actually community, the communities that we're part of as a whole, and think about like the whole artist and how do you actually support the whole artist would be really exciting shift to see.
Yeah,
I love that, Matt. I love what you just said. I just want to further it, and I hate the word piggyback, but just to put a cherry on top of what you just said, I think if Artist Trust were really artist led and sort of artist centered, a lot of things would be different. I think it's really easy to sort of fall into these traditional modes of being, like the way organizations and institutions are, like it's always been that way. Let's just keep perpetuating that. But if this is really a conversation about what's possible, artists, many of us understand practice. Like at our core, we understand practice. And many of us, our practice involves other people. And it would be interesting to see what would happen if some of these funding opportunities actually involved practicing some of these experiences that we all do share. You know, what if there was funding you could only get through collaboration? Maybe there's funding you can only get through mentorship. Maybe there's funding you can only get if you're a person of color. I mean, I just think that we can dream big if that's what we're here to do, but I don't know how imaginative we really want to be. Maybe we want to be more practical. But practicum and practice is such an essential part of the existence of the artist. I'd say even more so than ego. You know, it's your practice defines you. How you do your work is so much about what your work is and how it comes out into the world. And I never do anything by myself, never.
Okay, that list you gave was great, Natasha. So hope we go back to look at that list of collaboration, you know, just different focus groups. And Matt, I heard you about the name grants. It's really difficult in that situation because if someone comes to you, an organization, so a donor comes and says, I want to put this money, but I want it to go like this, you don't say no to them. So that's also goes back to the issue that Chris was talking about, you know, separating the donor factor, because donors have so much power in how things run. So I just wanted to touch on each of those things, but I want to ask Remelisa a question because we're talking about being inclusive and successful. And one of the biggest problems that's always been in existence since my 22 years of knowing Artist Trust, when I moved to Seattle, was them being seen as a statewide organization because there's a lot of resentment in other parts of the state that they felt like they were being ignored. And if you looked at who was getting funding, it actually correlated with a lot of their concerns. So Remelisa, what would a successful Artist Trust and inclusive, reaching everyone in a relationship to that?
I've been actually meditating on that question for quite some time because with Spokane, and I'm going to lump Central Washington as well, and a lot of the smaller towns throughout Washington state, there is a lot of voices feeling left out, that they aren't really heard, that their work is not validated. They feel like Artist Trust is more of a Seattle thing. So whenever I end up talking about other programs, they're like, wait, are you sure we're allowed to? There's almost like this weird permission thing that needs to happen. But also I think the largest part, and this may be true in Seattle as well, is just being able to put a face, to have that familiarity and that connection. I think that's going to go miles just to be able to, whether connecting with other artists who have been awarded, but also those who are working in the organization, and to be able to put a friendly face and go, well, I know I can reach out to Lydia about a question I have.
Okay, I'm just going to throw something ridiculous out there for you, Remelisa. What if we were to split up the state and designate a certain number of grants, gap grants to different parts of the state, to where you have to have this number go to Spokane, but this number go to Yakima? I don't know, is that something that would be too ridiculous, or would it be a good idea?
I don't think it'd be that ridiculous. I'm not sure logistic-wise what those numbers would look like, but I think they could be, it would then be fair to know that you at least have a chance to, I hate this term, but to sit at the table. We won't talk about why I have problems with that term, but yeah, to know that they at least have a standing chance, because with how it was previously, you don't know the percentage of, well, is someone in Yakima going to get a grant? Is someone in Spokane going to get it? What about in like Pullman? We don't know how many people are allotted until they've decided.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a big question. And there's this whole gerrymandering thing that we're dealing with voting. You can draw the district lines. Melissa Hines, who I work with at the Office of Arts and Cultural Affairs, may she rest in peace. She's a wonderful person. She mentioned, if you're not at the table, you're probably on the menu. I've never forgot that statement, but anytime someone says that, I always think of that. Let's go on to the second question, which we've actually covered so much in this in the last few minutes, but how do you re-envision Artist Trust with community in mind? And I think so many of the things touched on that, but can anyone elaborate on something more specifically with community in mind? Like, I know Natasha, you mentioned the different types of grants that promote collaboration. Are there any other ideas or aspects?
It's kind of radical to be really transparent about how much money you have and what you intend to spend it on. But we're being radical. We're having a conversation about possibilities. So why not encounter all the possibilities? If that existed, if there was like a nice visual, maybe an animation that just walks me through like what Artist Trust is, how you get your money, and how you spend your money, that's an interesting way to say hello. It's certainly not the way everyone else does it. But I feel like transparency is kind of like the new radical, especially around finances. So I kind of want to know, like, how many people from Yakima have been funded in the last 5 years? How many of those people were white identified? You know, how many of those people have other sort of intersectional identities going on that, you know, make their experience on this planet categorically more vulnerable? I think we can't really get away from the system of white supremacy sort of being over everything. But if we're self-aware about it, we can course correct. And that can look like very deliberate acts. Like we are just no longer are we interested in funding, you know, maybe only up to 50% of our grants can go to white identified folks. I mean, I don't even think that that's fair. I think it could be more radical than that. But I'm just saying, like, you could have limitations on how the funding is actually released. If you were to, and this is me just spitballing here, but if there was some sort of like a Discover Washington grant that rotates annually. So it's Pullman one year, and really the only people who can apply are people from Pullman. And it's Yakima the next time. And what it does is for the whole state, it lets us know who else is here and what they're doing. And there's kind of a focus on that area for that year. That might make things feel a little bit more, you know, less weighted to Seattle. And again, I'm making up these ideas in real time, so they may not be winners, but I'm throwing it out there.
No, these ideas don't cost anything. This is beautiful. Yes. I can see Chris.
Yeah, I kind of want to continue on that route, especially with the idea of really getting, you know, the idea of getting artists to have more stake in the programs. You know, I would be interested in, as I understand it, you know, there are kind of just set granting programs that exist on an annual or, you know, basis, and that just go in cycles. But what if there were, you know, artist-directed grants that were, you know, create, like, you know, the narrative is created by artists, and to specifically focus on a specific group that maybe those artists get to decide, you know, like group of artists gets to, yeah, decide a group or a geographical area or demographic that they want to be able to grant to. They can like then create the narrative and do the work of, like, you know, reading grant applications, and then, you know, maybe even some of the fundraising to a certain extent, and maybe, you know, maybe some of the fundraising there is built into like paying those artists to like do that work, because obviously that's quite a bit of work. But, you know, if there were grants that were artist directed, where they could decide, you know, we want money to go to this this community, and then have that be rotating, you know, or, you know, the next time it comes around, it's, you know, another group of artists that are deciding where they want money to go to, in a way that is getting people involved in the organization in a meaningful way, and allowing them to give back to the arts, arts communities, think that, I don't know, that'd be an interesting, like, kind of, radical program that I could see being really successful.
Yeah, Chris, something specifically for Matt. So, but what you're saying, Chris, is something about empowering artists and not just receiving money. So along the lines of empowering artists with something like, this is a Matt question, because you were part of the letter that got this thing going and bringing attention. What about an artist advisory board that was more integral in decision-making with Artist Trust? What are your thoughts around that?
I'm kind of hesitant on the idea of advisory boards in general. I mean, I would much rather see, I think that a really underused part of Artist Trust's organization is that it actually is a membership organization. I mean, I'm not a member because I haven't been so enthusiastic about Artist Trust's operations. And I'm not sure how many members they have, but I think that, really like thinking hard about what membership can mean operationally in terms of like actual decision making, this is sort of like what Chris was saying too, I think, like actually pulling artists into the loop of how Artist Trust is prioritizing the spending of its money, particularly. Could be done through something like, I think rather than sort of setting aside like, this group of people who are going to be the ones who get to decide this year for it, like you could have, more democratic mechanisms where there's, it's like more like a cooperative organizational model where there's, there's real power invested in all of the members, the membership of the organization. I think currently Artist Trust membership kind of runs a little bit like, it reminds me of like airline frequent flyer programs or something where it's like, you get a discount maybe on something and, it's sort of supposed to inspire some sort of loyalty to the organization. But I think if you really want loyalty, there has to be some sharing of power along with it.
Okay, let me rephrase, not advisory board, but a board that actually had a committee, that actually had a budget, that actually had power and decision-making capacity that is comprised of artists, but they have to be artists from across the state. So we have Remelisa in Eastern Washington, as well as Yakima represented, as well as, Bainbridge Island. So I don't know, thoughts around that?
I think there's a lot of room for reimagining what a board is, like who is on a board and what form a board takes. Like I think that there's a lot of conventional wisdom that it has to be a certain way that kind of mirrors how for-profit corporations work with a hierarchical organization, and it doesn't. There's no reason why a nonprofit has to run that way. So I think there's a lot of room to think about, like, what is it a board? Could the board be just all of the employees, everyone who works at Artist Trust? Could the board be all of the members or some subset of the members who have a certain term to serve in that capacity? I think there's a million possibilities.
I'm just curious, how many of the panelists are members of Artist Trust?
I honestly can't tell you because it kind of comes and goes, right?
Mm-hmm. Right.
Like it appears when you get something and then it disappears. And then you also have the option of electing in, right? And I know at some point, since I've been in Seattle, I elected to be an Artist Trust member. But I've been in Seattle for over 10 years. So I don't know that I'm up to date on my dues or anything. I would be surprised if I was. But I think Matt brings up a really important point, and that membership should get you something. And if you ask artists what's of value to us, many of us find each other to be of incredible value. I feel like I could turn the people on this call into I could turn a dime just waving my magic conceptual artist wand. If it was and for participating at this call, now you get to have a play date with the people on the call. Be like, word, let's do that. Because our creativity and our connections to each other often pay off in ways that maybe aren't even financial, but who in Seattle and how you're connected to them and how many opportunities you have to work with people who are perhaps more established than you or, as established as you. This has value. And I think that the network itself, the group of people that have been affected, touched in some way, good, bad, or otherwise, by Artist Trust, that's a pretty vast network of folks. And I'm something of a networker, if you know me. So I think about these things.
Let's go back to with community in mind. I mean, we have a rapid changing community in the whole state because the cost of living has gotten higher because we have the wealthiest people, several of the wealthiest people in the world living in the area. The cost of living is a great deal higher than when I moved there 22 years ago. I moved there during the dot-com period, so I was there for the rise and the crash, so I saw that, and I was kind of happy because I was so freaked out about the prices going up. So when the crash happened, I was like, whew, I'll be able to keep my studio for a little longer, which sold last year. But how, I mean, Artist Trust can only do so much about the cost of living in Seattle, but with people, you know, getting overwhelmed and by the cost of living and hustling, you got to admit that it's probably difficult to actually focus on community. So I don't even know what my question is. Can Artist Trust be a catalyst in creating community in such a place that has a, you know, high cost of living and is more difficult to create? Yeah. So yes.
Yes, absolutely. I think Artist Trust has to know sort of like who's in community already working on these things, like cost of living, with tips on like where the cheapest places are to live and how you get in there, get on the wait list. Just really having better relationships in community will go far. But I also think there's things that are kind of obvious. Like we're coming up on the holidays here, and every artist I know is getting ready to like shake a shingle, you know, like, hey, remember, I paint things, I sculpt things, I do things, like, please remember me in your holiday sort of gift giving. If there was just like an annual marketplace, like a digital marketplace that was slick and you're a member and like you just submit your little photos like it was a grant, and your items can be, you know, sold on this Artist Trust marketplace. Like, don't pick Amazon, pick Artist Trust's pop-up marketplace. I think that would add value. I think artists really, we do a lot of things on our own, and it gets exhausting. So just a little support, you know, which really involves deep listening. Like, what do people need? How often are you asking your members what actually would add value to their lives? And then are you adaptable and nimble enough to course correct and really try to serve those folks, whoever they may be that year? So just throwing that out.
Yeah. Good stuff. Matt, are you at a stand-up desk, by the way?
I am standing, yeah. It's
okay.
Not a dresser, a stand-up dresser, but
it's just hard to read your body language when you're standing straight. So I was like,
oh really? Oh.
Yeah.
I think better standing up. I don't know what it is, but I was just thinking, well, two things. The first is that things are very expensive in Seattle and other parts of the state, but there's also a lot of money being made here. And I think that one of the things that Artist Trust could do is think about fundraising activities in a much bigger picture that includes advocacy for artists in the community. You know, there was just, who was it that just gave like millions to, there was some foundation or someone who gave millions to like Seattle Art Museum, the ballet, the opera, the whoever, you know, the sort of established large arts institutions that, you know, a tiny little bit of that trickles down to artists who are working in the state. But, you know, what if like Artist Trust really was out there, like pounding the pavement, educating donors, foundations, general public about really like why it is so crucial to keep artists in cities like Seattle and other cities around the state, and really like trying to change the conversation around where those dollars go. Because I think there is a lot of potential money out there. The other side of it, and the other thought is, Paul, when you were saying, this is going back to something you were saying earlier about those name awards, and you don't say no to a donor. I totally disagree. I think you absolutely say no to a donor if what they want doesn't align with what kind of, what your values are as an organization. And it can be really hard to do that. It's really hard to stand up that way when you're an organization that runs on a shoestring and knows that every dollar can really be used by artists. But I think that it's even more powerful when an organization is really clear about what they value, what kind of communities they want to support and see, and work methodically towards that goal, saying no when it's necessary to say no, and really being out there putting that vision forward in the community. I mean, I don't think that, I don't think Artist Trust exists like that there's a community, artist community out there, and Artist Trust like just has to somehow connect with it. You know, it's like, first of all, there's like a lot of communities, you know, especially when we talk about Washington State. And second of all, Artist Trust actually, like what they're doing is forming a vision, working towards a vision of what our communities can be, and putting money behind that vision. And so that vision needs to be super clear. And I think other things will follow from that.
I just want to respond real quick to the money thing. You helped me realize, I was thinking of the awards that I've received, and 90% of them are named. We don't really think about it though. The Guggenheim, Joan Mitchell Award, I mean, there's so many named awards. But I think the thing that we can do, and 2 months ago, I turned down a substantial amount of money from a tobacco company. They go around and they do this weird thing where they call you up and say you're eligible for an award, and then they tell you what it's about. And that happened to me. This isn't going to be posted on YouTube, is it? I don't want to say anything bad about these folks, but my father died of cancer, so I didn't take that money. But I'm thinking what can be done with Artist Trust is we will take your money, but not necessarily make a name award. We can actually direct how the money goes, and they can choose to stay or go. And I agree with you on that. But I don't think name awards are the worst thing about awards. I mean, if it was Jeffrey Epstein or something, yes, it's not too soon. We definitely need to consider where that money is coming from. I mean, MIT had to deal with a lot of that, as well as many other organizations, because that was money that, I mean, at the time, many of them knew that was questionable money. But I think whether it's for ego, legacy, or whatever, I think, honestly, I don't think we'd have any social workers if it wasn't for ego, a little bit ego, because people like helping, you know, but I know it's really tricky when you're in the situation where you're an artist, and we always feel like we have to ask for permission to create. We have to justify every single dollar. There's no other profession I've ever seen where we've had to feel like we had to justify every single dollar that we get. And it's so small compared to defense spending. We're going to spend more money on defense than we spend on the arts by the time I finish this sentence. Just did. So I want to get to the last question before we go. Did anyone else have anything to say on that? All right. We're doing great on time, by the way, which is really unusual. I don't know what's going on here. But really, we've already covered a lot of this already, but how can Artist Trust innovate in regards to how they serve artists? And I think we've covered a lot of that, but I want to challenge all of you, you know, and I keep going back to you, Matt, use your imagination. The sky is the limit. You just took over the organization and you can reshape it any way, shape, or form. What is the best way that we can innovate and actually serve artists, serve creatives, serve makers, serve community? How can we do that? No limit.
I'm throwing this out like a noodle onto a wall, but in the before times, prior to the COVID pandemic shutting down travel, one of the ways that I get a lot of joy is through travel. And I recently being in the before times, was brave enough to try out Airbnb experiences. And it was incredible. It was super fun, very interpersonal. I bring this up because I think Artist Trust could definitely showcase members of the community through experiences. I don't know if this is something that would happen as part of the regular benefit auction, but you know, I would definitely bid on an experience with the artists on this call, a variety of experiences. You know, even it could be just like, I'm going to try to teach you how to paint watercolor of a vagina. I think that especially as we head into the darker months, understanding that our mental well-being is definitely part of our existence as artists, and having ideas like that are fun and engaging, just on a very basic marketing level, appeals to people. I would also say, and this is sort of tagging on to what Matt was saying, it wouldn't hurt Artist Trust to literally and actually find out who sort of the wealth advisory firms are in the state, and actually introduce yourself, make an appointment, meet those people. Because, you know, at one point in my life, I did a lot of admin work, and I worked at a wealth advisory firm. No clients came in who had less than $2.5 million. If you had less than that, you're too broke for that firm. And these people are not necessarily innovative. They're not necessarily creative. So a lot of these donations that go to like the Seattle Art Museum, the opera, the ballet, it's just because people want to give to the arts, but they don't actually know anything but those organizations. So I think the onus is also on Artist Trust to really put yourself out there, really meet folks, do the networking, to make the organization as sustainable as possible, so that you diversify the pool where the money is coming from by putting yourself out there. But that's all I got right now in terms of noodles and walls. And yes, put a Black woman in charge. Like if you really want to just like live, then like put a Black woman in charge of your budget and watch it grow wings and fly.
Super. Thanks. Leaning forward, Chris. Yes.
Yeah, I think what I would really like to see is for Artist Trust to really be able to meet artists where they are on a daily basis, where they operate, where they perform, where they show their work. I mean, I would say that most artists, you know, they have their own small niche, you know, communities that they exist in. They're used to putting on their own shows. Like it's a very DIY kind of world that most artists live in. And I think it would be really amazing to see an organization, you know, be able to meet artists on that level, you know, not just, you know, valuing, you know, the big gallery show or art museum show or concert hall show, but to be, you know, somehow engage with artists at the house show, at the warehouse, at the, you know, basement or wherever artists are typically going to be on any given night, you know, in the pre-COVID times. I think that would be really amazing, you know, to have staff and board be engaging with art on that level. And, you know, I'm looking at Christina right now because I know Christina does a lot of that, is always at house shows and like showing up to weird places to go see music. And I think that's really great. You know, what if all of the people involved in Artist Trust were constantly showing up to these weird things that artists are always doing? I think that would be, yeah, I think it would be amazing. You know, I'm thinking about the big, you know, fundraising like art auction. And I remember, you know, being at that a couple years ago and thinking it was a really amazing event. But then also kind of looking around and like, you know, I only knew a handful of people there. And I was thinking like, where are all these like, you know, wealthy white people who are willing to spend $1,200 on a cake, you know, when it comes to like showing up to my show, like things that they're actually, you know, where their money is actually going to, you know, or buying a record or buying a piece of art. Like, what are the ways that Artist Trust can connect donors, you know, to the artists and the art that's being made in events and stuff? I think that would be an interesting thing to explore.
Before Remelisa or Matt responds, there's a recurring theme around creating revenue possibilities, whether it be the market. And it sounds like this could be like a tour thing. Like, what if Artist Trust had a concert series that it sponsored, invited members out, and, you know, and featured recipients as well, but then the money generated that day would go to the artists. But I think it's the bottom line is money, right? An opportunity and support in that form and creating community at the same time. Am I missing something, Remelisa, Matt? Remelisa.
Just minor notes, because a lot of what everyone has been saying, I resonate with a lot. I do want to bring up just education and just more like accessibility. Sometimes it just feels like I'm out in the middle of nowhere and I have no access to the tools or the knowledge to know where to go next. What is next?
Super, thanks. Matt, you have anything?
Well,
You can say no too. I'm sorry, I don't mean to force you every
that's
time.
okay. Yeah, why don't we just go to the questions? Let's see if there's any questions.
Actually, I'd love to ask all of you a question. I would love for you to answer this question, yes or no. This is a pop question, so you can say yes, no, or decline, okay? So I've been to Philadelphia, and they have the Pew Foundation there. Pew gives out $75,000 fellowships to about 20 artists every single year. That's a lot of money. $75,000. You can actually buy property. You can do something with that. So what if someone's like a local company that starts with the letter A were to say, I'm going to give $50 million so we can have that same level of funding here. I want Artist Trust to administer that. Would you say yes, no, or you decline to answer?
Let the Lord do it. I know if you're talking about the organization I'm talking about, they have to care first.
Yeah. Yeah. Any other chime in? Remember, you're on the record.
Yeah, I mean, sure, why not? I mean, unless they start putting all sorts of restrictions on how the money can be spent, like
unrestricted.
Take it.
I might get in trouble for this because I work for a development team, but we've joked about we will gladly take money from the devil as long as we can have control over how it's allocated and where it's distributed.
It's the equivalent of the devil, yes. You got it. Yes, Chris.
Can I just add something too? Like also,
oh, sure.
there would need to be some serious conversation about them not having like the right to use the images of the artists who receive the work or their work for any of their corporate purposes. That would be really important too.
That's actually no. You don't have to do anything. Just the money. That's it. No ties. You don't. Their name is not even on the check. They don't put you on their website like the tobacco company wanted to. You don't have to do anything. Chris, yes, no, or decline?
Yeah, hell yeah, take the money.
Okay, super. I order from the devil quite regularly. I got this new nifty light that I'm using to shine more brightly as the sun goes down here. So it's really tricky with the whole capitalism thing. But we're healthy now. Thank you for being open. We're going to open up the floor to questions. I guess I should direct folks to put questions in the chat box, and we're going to, feel free to ask really tough questions because that's what we're here for. I think we've had a lot of good answers, by the way. A lot of innovative thought. Actually, for the panelists, do you think do you have any questions or any statements you think we've left out of this conversation that's missed that you'd like to say in relationship to what the future could look like, how we could better serve artists and be more inclusive, more innovative, and just more real?
Here's a question for the panel. Like how, like in the immediate future, like how should Artist Trust approach their process around reimagining themselves? Like what is a process that makes sense that could actually really reach a community that's really engaged with them and really achieve some of these goals, especially the anti-racist and anti-white supremacist parts of the things that I'm hearing from Artist Trust, like their desire for that to be front and center in this transformation. Yeah, how do they go forward from, if we think of this event as like kind of the start line for the public portion of their transformation, they're in the cocoon, like, gonna be a butterfly hopefully someday, like what happens in that cocoon?
in a very brass tacks way. Like racism is encoded in policies and procedures, in hiring practices, and in all the structures that you feel like are holding up artist trust right now. That's where the racism lives. So to be anti-racist, you really have to be willing to change and overhaul your systems, because any system currently in place is going to be upholding white supremacy. It's really hard to think about this, but sometimes before the understanding comes, there are actions you can do. And one of the first things you can do is look at how you're spending your money and how your money is coming in and how it's going out. And just break it down intersectionally, demographically. Start there, you know? There should never be a response like, well, we tried to hire another person of color, but we just couldn't find anybody. What that means is that you don't have connections in those communities, you know, so that you would have to do the work to build those connections. I think my biggest dream for Artist Trust is to be trusted by artists in the state. Trusted and thought of fondly. And I think it's a lot easier for those of us who've received funding to kind of like err on the side of like, well, I really want this to work out. But if you're not on that side, you know, what is motivating you? You know, in fact, in this conversation, it's kind of wild that the conversation is anchored by people who have received funding from Artist Trust. Maybe talk to people who haven't. Give them this much of a platform to speak.
We have a question from Nadia, but I actually was reading some Malcolm X today. Actually, I brought up some during a meeting today with a large foundation, and it was Malcolm X quote about the white liberal. But basically, you can't really look to basically white-led organizations to solve problems for Black people or communities of color. I mean, so to be anti-racist, to actually, I don't know. My question is actually kind of, you know, Chris and Natasha, you talked mostly about the anti-racism, but how can you work in a system that's designed to work against you? You don't have to answer that, by the way.
I've talked a lot, so I was like, Chris, go for it. I nominate you, buddy.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. And I got to say, I appreciate you answering this, because we actually gave pre-questions and there are no springers out there except for that last Amazon, that organization that starts with an A question and this one here. So.
Yeah, could you just ask that again really quick, Paul? I had a thought and then I lost it for a moment.
I guess, can communities of color look to an organization that's mainly white-led, white-ran, and I mean, I can count the number of people of color that have worked at Artist Trust, you know, on less than two hands, you know, and I've known the organization for 22 years. When I first arrived, it was all white women, and then they hired a white male, Fionn, and Luther, I think it's the first Black employee that I know, and how many years did that take, you know? But can you really look at an organization for help and to innovate and to serve you if the basis of the organization has been this? Even with radical change now, Artist Trust will predominantly be a white-led organization. And if you put a white leader in it, there's still going to be elements of white supremacy, and you know, that's just a fact. When Obama was president, white supremacy still dominated. So can we trust a system that's led and dominated by white supremacy to actually change, to actually support, and to be truly anti-racist?
I mean, the short answer is no. You can't, because you know, white supremacy is always going to be a big part of the equation. You know, and that's a hard thing to reckon with, because I think, you know, we're all trying to do the right thing. The organization is trying to do the right thing. I think it's important to acknowledge that while that is the reality, the work of anti-racism is continual and ongoing, you know, and it needs to evolve and adapt, you know, every step of the way, every year, every month, every day, because that's just the nature of it. You know, there's always going to be new hurdles that that BIPOC folks are you know, coming up against. So while that is the case, yeah, I think it's useful to just say, you know, we acknowledge that white supremacy is central to how organizations function. So we're going to continue to do that work constantly. And we're not going to be perfect, and we're going to make mistakes along the way, and we're going to continue to do the work by having the voices of people that are most affected in decision-making processes so that we can make adjustments and be better in the future.
Excellent answer. No one could have said it better. Let's go to a question from, seriously, perfect answer. Nadia, Ahmed, I'm not sure if I should read the names of the people who asked the questions, but I just did, so that cat's out of the bag. Speaking of cat, Cezanne, your cat is really cute when he goes by, or she, sorry, or whatever gender identifying the cat does. But Artist Trust is currently looking at new leadership models. Do panelists have any ideas or suggestions on models? Remelisa.
Sorry, I was just scratching my head, but now that I'm on the spot. Oh, so my ideas for, run that question by me one more time, please.
Oh, Artist Trust is currently looking at new leadership models. Do panelists have any ideas or suggestions on models?
That's a really tough question for me because I have been so embedded with just hierarchy. Like there's the top of the pinnacle there, and then everyone else is below. I think if we're going to be super radical about it, it would be great to flip it on its head. It doesn't have to be just that one head point. It could branch out, and it probably should.
So, Matt.
There's a blog I've been really enjoying lately called Nonprofit AF, written by this guy. Do you guys know of this? Voulet is his name, and he's in Seattle. And it's here. I'll put the link in the chat. It's he has some really great perspectives on these questions about particularly like how do you make a nonprofit. How do you restructure it, new leadership models? And he just started with some other folks a community-centric fundraising organization to try to put forward ideas about different new models basically for nonprofits. So I think that's a great resource. And he's also really funny in this blog. It's actually, it's kind of wonky stuff, but it's also hilarious.
Oh, super. Great. Hey, Chris?
I don't know a whole lot about, hierarchical leadership models, but I would say just as a gut reaction is that having representation in staff and on board that's diverse in a way that looks like the community that you want to serve. I don't, how many board members or staff live in Eastern Washington? What is the racial and gender makeup of board and staff? I think those things all need to reflect the community that you want to, that you envision serving. Just generally speaking, and I think that can go a lot deeper in a lot of ways.
Yeah. Natasha, model.
I want to say that if the wheel is racist, you don't want to reinvent it. Meaning that like thinking in terms of hierarchy is probably the wrong way to go. You're probably going to manifest and uphold white supremacist frameworks no matter what you do without trying that hard. But we already know that like traditional, quote unquote, traditional leadership models, no good at all. So anything but what has been done before would be the direction to go now. And, I'm known for my subtlety, so yeah.
I want to make sure we're actually getting questions coming through. Just got a message from Ann, just for y'all to know. The chat box says comments can only be seen by you, the panelists. not by we attendees. How things going in the operations there? Okay.
I think she's referring that she wasn't able to see the link that Matt sent.
Oh,
So
okay.
we can go ahead and send that out to participants afterwards. We've only received one question so far.
Super. Any of the panelists have questions for each other or for the group?
I just had a quick comment to tag along on what Natasha just said. I think that I just would love to see Artist Trusts have an enormous appetite for risk in this process. Like, I think that they, like just try stuff. And, I mean, this may not be super popular position to take, but it might be okay if Artist Trust goes away. You know what I mean? Like, or if like it doesn't survive this transition because it tried really risky things and they failed, and that we all learned something from that process. It's, organizations, I think really should come and go. Like, I don't think that any of them should be really permanent, and Artist Trust has had a really long, good run. So maybe like, this dilemma of how do you reform an inherently white supremacist structure of an organization, the answer might be that you end it and you distribute those resources to places that don't have that starting point.
Would it be a better argument to let Seattle Art Museum go away, or the Seattle Symphony, or the ballet, or the opera? I can keep going. I don't know, as far as diversity and impact, I mean, the New York Philharmonic had as its first Black principal musician. The Met just commissioned its first Black composer to do an opera. And and these organizations have 100-something year history. So and we can get on the Artist Trust about not doing so much for 30 years, but they've done a lot more than some organizations who've done very little to nothing with over 100-year history. I mean, I was a janitor at the Seattle Art Museum, and the only other Black people that worked there were security guards and other janitors. On the 5th floor was totally white. And I think since I left, there have probably been 2 Black people that have worked up there, Sandra Jackson Dumont and what's the other artist, wonderful, I can't remember her name. But yeah, I don't know, I just negated what you said, Matt, but I was thinking, I don't know if is the world better? Even some of my least favorite artists, I think it's better that they're there than they're not being there, there's a purpose that's served, but what would something replace it that would be better, and what would that look like? And I have no idea. Or maybe it's a nonprofit industrial complex that's really just not working in general, not just Artist Trust, maybe the Girl Scouts and Red Cross and every single nonprofit out there is really mainly just failing. Even Ford Foundation with their $8 billion or Mellon.
I think, sorry to interrupt you, Paul.
Oh, no,
I think
I'm just rambling on, so please.
No. I want to say that, like, I think the takeaway here, though, from what Matt said is like radical thinking is radical. It might even make you feel uncomfortable. It might send you into a spiral of like, oh God, oh no, what do you mean? And then like questions start coming, but like, it's worth it to think radically, even if we think in that direction. Think in all the directions. Just don't reproduce the same, And you have a question as well from Laurel in the chat.
And has Artist Trust, Laurel of Newham, has Artist Trust considered any kind of trainings for artists during this formal pause of the art sector worldwide? Arts business, night school, resume, artist statements, financial literacy, etc., etc. And that's an Artist Trust question. Yes, Lydia.
Hey, thanks for the question, Laurel. We have offered a handful of webinars throughout this year while we've been working remotely. With that being said, we intend to do a lot more of that work in 2021. Like everyone, this year has definitely been a year of learning for us about how to continue to offer our programs remotely. And also, since the summer, a large part of our staff's time has been spent on this transition work and sort of triage after the community asked us to reevaluate a lot of our internal policies and procedures. So we have a staff of 7, and there are only 2 of us who are working on grants and outward facing programs like webinars and trainings. So we really appreciate your interest and look forward to being able to serve you with more of those programs in 2021.
Yeah, thank you so much. And we're a little over time. And Matt, your question's in my brain. I've already got the cue to stop this whole thing, but it makes you wonder. It's like, this is a yes or no or don't say. I mean, would you miss Artist Trust if it wasn't there, if it were to disappear tomorrow? Actually, don't even answer that, but it's something to think about. And I want to thank the panelists, Matt, Chris, Natasha, Remelisa, and I want to thank the staff and the board for having this. This is real. This is open, honest discussion. I got to apologize again for me rambling on about the demise of all nonprofits, but you know, it's on my mind. But this is, again, the beginning of many, many conversations hopefully we're going to have, and we're going to be transparent, and we're going to be honest, and like Brene Brown, we're going to be vulnerable, because that's where our strength is going to come from in the long run. Because if we have this performative type activism, which you're seeing a lot of right now, it's just going to fail, because we're beyond workshops, we're beyond diversity coordinators. People want action right now. And I think Artist Trust in doing this is the beginning of taking some kind of action. So I don't know if we end here or.
I just want to thank you, Paul, and thank everyone who's on this call on the screen and also in the audience, Natasha, Remelisa, Matthew, and Chris. Thank you all for being here for our first community conversation. There'll be a recording of this event, and there's also going to be a feedback form that'll hit all of your inboxes tomorrow. And of course, I'm happy to talk to anyone individually, as is anyone on our staff or board, if you'd like to reach out that way. And we just really look forward to exploring these topics here in this kind of community conversation in this virtual space, but also elsewhere. And I also want to say that, you know, we have been involved in a lot of conversations like this as a staff and board, and with some other artists. And just to share with you that there's really a lot of alignment between what you all are saying and what we're hearing in other work groups, and at the staff level and the board level as well. And that feels really great to me. And I'm also interested in this idea of, as a vision exercise, what does it look like for us to put ourselves out of business, you know? So there's nothing that's too radical to put on the table. And I thank you all for leading us in that direction. But thanks again, and we look forward to continue working together.
Ooh.